Hello, chess friends, and welcome to Jozarov's chess channel, and welcome to the chess.com Speed Chess Championship in 2020. Today, with a very intense match game between the current European against the current world champion in chess. It's of course Vladislav Artemiev against Magnus Carlsen. So, this is now the first tournament that Magnus is continuing after the Skilling Open that he lost in the finals against Wesley So. And what I really liked about the tournament of this Skilling Open is that Magnus Carlsen, after the loss, he was really realistic about his game. He said simply, Wesley So played better. I'll try next time much harder. He wasn't really unrealistic. He didn't say something like, oh, I had some better lines in this particular game. I had maybe some better lines. No, he just said the Wesley deserves his win. He didn't search for excuses, and that's really a world champion that we need, that he really understands his games, that he's not talking some nonsense about some particular lines. It's really great to see him also that he's a fair loser sometimes. So let's check out now this match game between Vladislav Artemiev against Magnus Carlsen. We're starting now with a very cool endgame here. Here Magnus Carlsen played with the black pieces. He has two connected pawns. He has the knight on the d3, and he's threatening now the move c3, c2, c1, and of course the promotion. The problem for Vladislav Artemiev is that he cannot create checks. Really incredible endgame, and also Vladislav Artemiev has a pass pawn, but it's really a little bit distant. It's really far away from the potential for promotion here on g8. Here it's white to play and try to see now the best continuation here for white. I'll give it a couple of seconds. I think it's a very cool endgame that was played here. This is not the game that we're analyzing another game, but try to see now the best continuation here for white. As usual, we say we have the sound, of course. We say test your might in chess. Try to see now the winning continuation for white, which unfortunately Vladislav Artemiev didn't see. It was of course a fast tempo, so that's why it was really hard to see. Of course, our guts is basically saying us that we should poach the pawn on g5 here, but basically this move g5 is a mistake, and here the best move is the move king to e4. Incredible move, because now Magnus Carlsen cannot push the pawn further here on c3. Because his knight is hanging, and it's simply lost endgame here for Magnus Carlsen. So, but in the game, Vladislav played the move g5, and here you see have some troubles. We have g6, we have c2, queen takes, king takes c2. Here we have g7, promotion to queen, and now queen to g8. But still, this is an equal endgame, and you know how Magnus Carlsen plays equal endgames, because if white plays his games perfect, it should be a draw. But here Magnus Carlsen, of course, will squeeze really every drop out of this position. It's really incredible what he does now. He's really gives you so much pressure, and of course in this fast time format, unfortunately Vladislav Artemiev cracked, and here after move king to g6, Magnus simply continued with some checks. Knight to d5, king to e6, queen to c6 to check, king to e5, we have queen to c3. You cannot take here the knight, because you get queen to b3 and you lose the queen on the diagonal. Here we have king to d6. Again, Magnus creates another check. King to c6. Again, another check. We have king to d7, and now comes the fork on f6, and it was game over. But it was really incredible how Magnus played this game. It was a Nimzo Larsen attack that he played with the black pieces, and he played such a great game. I will show you the PGN of the whole game in the description below. I think for those who have troubles maybe to play against the Nimzo Larsen attack, it's the attack with the first move b3 and bishop to b2, building sort of a Nimzo Indian setup. But from white's perspective, it's sort of a Nimzo Indian with +1 tempo for white. I'll explain you, of course, in some of my future videos what's all about. I think we'll study this opening also from white's perspective. As I said, I'll show you the PGN of this game in the description below, so you can maybe analyze the whole game. But it was a little bit long, and this cool endgame, I think it's really worth to see. So let's check out now one whole game between Magnus Carlsen and Vladislav Artemiev. Here Magnus Carlsen played with the white pieces, and he opened with the move e4, c5, knight to f3. We have a6. Here we have c4, building sort of a Maroczy bind setup. We are not allowing some d5 pawn breakthrough motifs by black. Here we have knight to c6. What Magnus has, of course, as a weakness is the weak d4 square, because the knight, the potential outpost knight, cannot be kicked away by any pawns. We have already made some progress with c4, e4, so you cannot play c3, e3 anymore. And what Magnus has, of course, is a dominant pawn structure, and he has a good control of the d5 square. But if Magnus, for instance, goes with the knight to c3, knight to d5 outpost, his potential outpost still can be kicked away with the potential pawn move, with the move e6. So there are, of course, always advantages and disadvantages in positions. So after the move knight to 6, Magnus improves the position immediately around the square d4. He's not allowing his opponent to take over in the center with some potential knight to d4 outposts. We have c takes d4, knight to d4, and now e5, which becomes now really similar to the Najdorf Sicilian when we play the move e5. In the game, knight to f5 played by Magnus, we have d6, because the threat was, of course, to play knight to d6. You have to cover the square. d6, we have knight to c3, and now g6. If you try bishop to f5, it seems like a good idea. Of course, you're kicking away a very active knight, but still after e takes f5, maybe knight to f6, or maybe you can try knight to e7. It's even a possibility. I'm not sure really which is the best line now for black, because basically this bishop takes f5 would be sort of a positional mistake, because I think we can play immediately moves like g4 after potential g6. Still we can take f takes g6, maybe h takes g6, but now bishop to g2, and now we have really a powerful control of the d5 square. Really a nice cemented knight it would be. If you even take, then we can reload here around the square d5. We can bring our bishop on this very active square. So from the square d5, this would be really a dominant bishop all over the board. So that's why you would lose, I think, in this particular line, the battle a little bit in the center. So that's why Vladislav didn't take the knight. He played g6, kicking away the knight, knight to e3, and now bishop to h6. This is a very cool idea by Vladislav Artemiev, because there is, I always like to talk about this idea in chess. It's always this relation between bishops and pawns. If we watch the pawn structure, then we can already notice that this bishop doesn't have a good activity. If you play it to g7, if you maybe play it to e7, it is always a little bit blocked out by your own pawn. So that's why we would love, of course, here to trade off our bad bishop basically for a good bishop on c1. If the knight moves somewhere, then we can take bishop to take c1, and black is continuing the game, I think, with a good bishop, because this light square bishop still has a good activity, and we could make progress maybe with some f5 motifs. On the other hand, if we now compare these activities again by these bishops, white would be continuing the game with a bad bishop on f1, which would be after potential maybe bishop to d3 move, would be blocked out by its own pawn. So that's why bishop to h6, a very nice positional idea by Vladislav. We have bishop to d3, knight to e7, h4. Magnus immediately attacks on the flanks, because he has now good protection of the center. And I've talked about yesterday about these ideas of flank attacks. I'll show you also the link of the flank attack possibilities. When is it possible to create flank attacks in chess? The main idea is to first to have your center protected. So that was the video. It was sort of a tutorial that I wanted to show you how to attack, how to create flank attack possibilities, and what are the main issues about flank attacks. One of the main issues is, of course, the central protection. You see now how Magnus Carlsen keeps his position around the center really compact. Now, when the position in the center is compact, then it's time to launch a flank attack. So that's really an important thing in chess that you should realize. As I said yesterday, it's unbelievable. I created a similar idea, a similar video in my Basics in Chess series. I'll show you the link, of course, of that video at the end of this video. So we have king to f8, because now there is this threat h5, h takes g6, and maybe you could open the h file. Then the bishop is a little bit loose on the board. We have h5, king to g7, knight to d5. We have bishop to c1. Now finally Vladislav gets rid of this very bad bishop. Queen to c1. What Magnus is, of course, trying is some ideas. H takes g6, and then if you, for instance, recapture with the f pawn, then you could have a very annoying queen to h6 move. So here h6, we have h takes g6, f takes g6, queen to e3. Again, Vladislav has opportunities, because still he can occupy the weak square on d4. As we said, this was, I think, in the beginning, the main hole in white's position. So here, knight to d4, we have castling by Magnus. He still has, of course, great attacking opportunities, because he can play f4 motifs, g4, f3, g4 motifs. He can really try to break the position in front of black's king. So here, knight takes d5. we have e takes d5. If you take, for instance, c takes d5, it's really a bad position. I think black is going to into normal lines, bishop to d7, rook to c8, and then b5, b4 ideas. This knight is very, very powerful. Even if you try to trade it off after potential maybe knight to e2, we'll simply take knight takes e2, bishop to e2, and still this bishop is much, much better than the bishop on f1. Again, it would be blocked out by this central pawns on light square. So in the game, this wasn't played. He played, of course, e takes d5. At least we have now a good diagonal for the bishop. Bishop to f5. Here Magnus opens now finally the position with the move f4. We have bishop to d3. But now it's not the time to take the bishop. Here Magnus Carlsen found a better move. F takes e5. Now the knight is hanging. In the game, knight to f5 was played. If you try d takes e5, we'll simply take out the bishop. If you try, for instance, queen to g5 here to trade off the queens, here after the move, if you try queen to g5 to maybe simplify the position, then we can play rook to d3, again forcing the trade of queens. Queen takes e3, rook to e3, and now maybe after knight to f5, simple rook to e1 helps out the rook, of course, and after maybe d takes e5, rook to e5, and here I think white is much, much better because we have a 4 versus 2 situation on the queen side here, 4 versus 2 pawns. This is really, I think, a bad game here for black. Here black has maybe 2 versus 1, but still it's not a problem. At least this pawn can hold, I think, a little bit longer. Here we have already an advanced pawn on the 5th rank, so it would be a better endgame here for Magnus. So after the move f takes e5, here knight to f5, queen to d3, we have d takes e5, but still again knight to e4. Although you have now still this pawn, still I think we can play something like c5, d6. We can kick away the knight again with g4. We can include this queen into the game. We can occupy the f file, then really nice attacking formations. I think black's pieces are simply too passive here. So rook to c1, rook to c8, pardon me, king to b1, escaping from potential tactical threats on the c file. So that's why you have to get out. Knight to d4, and now rook to f1. We have b5. Here Vladislav is trying to open the position somehow, also to create some kind of counterattack possibility, but it's a little bit too late because Magnus attacks simply the weak e5 pawn. You have to protect it. Rook to e8, but now rook to f6. Very nice move, of course, attacking the weak g6 pawn. Now we have to improve g5, and now queen to h3, again threatening here. We have a nice tactical shot, of course, around the square h6, so that's why rook to h8, and now rook to f1. Here you see how Magnus builds now really a nice attacking formation. He has now basically the pieces on the best course on the board. Now Vladislav is trying to protect his 7th rank, of course. We have d6, queen to a8, and now queen to g4. Here after rook to a7, Magnus finds really nice tactical shot. It's a forced checkmate. Knight takes g4. If you try h takes g5, we have queen to g5, then you have only one square. Rook to h6 will happen. Even if you escape, for instance, after the move knight to g5, if you try, for instance, like something like rook to g8 to compete somehow here, then again you get a nice tactical shot. Knight to f7. You have to escape here to f8, again knight to e5 at check, and you lose simply the rook. Maybe you can cover here, but it's not a problem. Still we can take, and king to e8, and here queen to g8. It would be game over. Vladislav Artemiev, after move knight takes g5 in this position, he realized, of course, the tactical threats and resigned the game. So it was a good match game. Magnus won it with a clear result, but still I think Vladislav Artemiev played really good games. You should also check out chessbump.com. All of the games, they're really cool, really nice attacking games, really nice tactics. And we'll follow now this chess.com Speed Chess Championship further. I hope you enjoyed. I really enjoyed this format because we have really sort of basketball format where you can maybe create some attacks, lose some games, but you can really get back into the game, and it's played in one day. It's really a dynamic setup, a really nice organized tournament by chess.com. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this coverage so far. If you want to see more of these games from this tournament, check out my chess.com Speed Chess Championship link, the playlist, the whole playlist that I've created so far. Here's the link. And if you want to see my yesterday's videos about this possible flank attacks, check it out. Here's also the link. As I said, it was unbelievable, but something occurred basically that I've explained yesterday here in this game, so you can also check it out. It's, I think, a very instructive video, and if you like my content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.